This is Van Electric Go live on the air with Michael Martin or Mike Martin. And his theme is like No One's Beyond Redemption. And he's always a project Mindfully Outdoors. And just before we get too far into it, we are on Newsly, which is an app you can get on your iOS system, on your phone or Android. Use coupon code GHOST2021. That will still work. You get 1 month free premium subscription. This podcast is on Newsly and gets translated to from video to voice. And so the Newsly point of view is stop streaming and stop scrolling and start listening. So you can actually take any of the podcast or news articles they do, and you actually can use your phone to actually listen to a podcast instead of watching it. So thank you and check that out. And we're glad to have you on the program. It was the first time we've interviewed you, and it's exciting to have new people on the program all the time.
I appreciate it, brother. I gotta, first of all, thank you, and also welcome you to the Deer Blind. I mean, this is what Project Mindfully Outdoors is all about. Being in the outdoors, engaging with Mother Nature.
Well, I think that's fantastic. I kind of told you before in the green room that I'm a mountain biker, and I am part Cherokee. So I think when I'm in the woods, I kind of feel like, and I've been able to get like deer and stuff to come right up to me and foxes and stuff. And I don't know why they don't get scared, but maybe that's the Cherokee in me. I don't know. But yeah, I do love being in nature when I do go on my cross country rides with my friends, and we try not to have a big impact because we're not using gas. We're just, we're using like pedal power.
I love that. And it is about that footprint, that footprint and the effect that we have on the land. And I love the fact that you mentioned how you're a Cherokee partially, and with talking about how the animals come up to you. How does that make you feel inside? How do you register with that?
Well, I really love it. I've been able to get birds to come up to me, like hawks and eagles to like not run away. And it just, I had a great grandmother who's a full-blooded Blackfoot, and then I have another one that was a Cherokee. And it was kind of like they always told me, like, nature and spirit animals are a big thing to us, to our peoples. And you should respect the animals as much as you respect any person. You should respect that lake. You should respect the mountain. You should respect the air. It was a different point of view. It could to a point of view where you use it versus like you embrace it and you give it respect, which I think is a different mindset.
And that right there is really what Project Mindfully Outdoors is all about. That connection, that respect from the land, and how we gain wisdom by putting those different practices into play out in the field. We're able to come back into the everyday world and be just that much more stronger, get over that much more of our traumas and heal our souls.
Yeah, and your story is very inspirational from what I've read in your bio. You had a failed suicide attempt, and then you were homeless, and you had all these life-changing events, and then you went through like this discovery where you confronted your mental health issues, and you decided that you were gonna stop the silent suffering that comes with depression and anxiety, and work through like self-growth through the outdoors, which I think is fantastic. That is a very positive attitude. I kind of all we do is we take our ability to do music and try to put that pain into art, and to put that pain into like nature, communing with nature, which I think is another good way of doing it.
See, it's kind of funny because there's two different paths that ended up merging to bring that all together. Number one was, as a kid, my grandfather introduced me to the outdoors. Then he had a massive stroke, and I kind of watched him for years and years deteriorate until finally he passed away. And through those years, I lost touch with the outdoors because obviously I was too young to get out there. I, like you, dipped into music, and I became very active in that sort of expression. The day that he passed away, I remember grabbing a fishing rod and running to the lake. And what I was out there chasing wasn't so much fish. It was more that spiritual connection and trying to honor and remember him. And then you fast forward the clock down a ways, And I hit that point that you mentioned where I was facing my second divorce. The last thing said to my face was I had nothing left to offer my family. And at the time, I was living in my truck. A couple hours after those words were said, I went to an old deer stand and, I tried to open that forever door. I wound up waking up the next day. I stumbled across, well, actually, I didn't stumble across, it was part of my daily or weekly practice of listening to a old podcast that was called The Hunting Collective.
Mm-hmm.
And the guest on that episode just happened to be Ryan Holiday. So inadvertently, I stumbled across Stoic philosophy. And in the course of the interview, Ryan was mentioning, different Marcus Aurelius quotes and so on. And one of them smacked me in the face. It was about adversity and how adversity really is nothing more than an opportunity to showcase who you truly are inside. And when I heard that, I thought about it. I was like, I've just been told that my worth is absolutely nothing. I know deep down inside, there's got to be something more than that to me. And if I was to die right here and right now, I don't want that to be the legacy that my kids remember. Therefore, I've
Mm-hmm.
got to grab the reins and I've got to face this stuff head on. And being the fact that I was living between my truck and the old deer blind obviously meant that I was spending a lot of time in the outdoors. And I'd get out there and I do things. I'd come back into the daily world for my day job, and man, it was a totally different script. I was lost in depression, lost in anxiety, and I couldn't really function. And one day I finally thought about it. I was like, I go out in the woods and I do all these things like second nature. There's a certain feeling of confidence that comes with that skill set. But that skill set, it actually ties into the daily life because we're doing the same thing just in different context. And as I started picking up these different philosophy books, it all started to click for me, where I started to realize that all this stuff ties together. I can go out in the woods and practice these things. I can learn how to connect with myself, heal my traumas, and explore the depression, the anxiety, and everything like that that's, you know, weighing me down in the everyday world. And I can start to climb back out of it. And that's exactly what the last almost 4 years now, man, that's crazy to say,
Wow.
is
So,
is really been for me.
so how did the Stoicism like play a role in changing that mindset to be able to apply it to the woods and to like regular daily life?
It was kind of one of those things that it made me stop and think. It was like I heard that quote, and not too long after that, I came across the Epictetus quote about, when you lay your children down every night, kiss them goodnight as if they're not going to survive or wake up tomorrow. And it really put everything in this like new context for me. Was like I go through the daily grind, taking for granted the fact that I'm here, not even really thinking about the fact I'm hiding behind all these different masks. I don't want that no more. I don't want that to be the way that my life is. I'm sick of wasting it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would sit in my truck, I would read, whatever. Then I'd go out, take a hike. And as I'm out there hiking, I'd start to think about it. And further down the road, I got into talk therapy to actually start addressing these things. And in a conversation about my sleeping pattern, which has always been absolutely horrible, me and sleep are not friends, it was suggested that I try to meditate for
Oh
sleeping.
yeah, yeah, that's a good
And
idea.
me in my situation, when that was mentioned to me, I laughed. I was like, dude, that has got to be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Me meditate?
Yeah, it's a different mindset because I'm a Buddhist and we do chanting and meditation as part of our practice, and people kind of look at us like, "What are you doing?" And
Right.
I practice a thing called like Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism, which is a Japanese form, and we actually chant in Japanese. And people are like, "What?"
And
They have no idea what we're doing, but it was like it actually calms us down. If you sit there and you meditate and you
yes,
it actually is a way to slow your heartbeat, to kind of get good breathing practice. It's like Tai Chi. It's like any of these practices, some like Eastern practices or like, indigenous people practices, they do have a lot of connection and they can get you back in the world, if you really think about it.
and see, then it was about this time of the year where I've got to start getting ready for deer season, and I got to start to up the time that I would spend pulling out the crossbow shooting. And that's where it all finally really clicked for me, because I'm sitting there staring through the scope and I'm breathing. And I thought about it. I'm like, man, meditation is breathing. My thoughts are slowed down. I'm meditating, even though
Oh,
I've got a
so you're
crossbow
able
in my hand.
to take
Yeah,
the parallel of being a hunter, being that patient, waiting for that moment to actually shoot the arrow off. There's a lot of time where you're waiting, right? There's a lot of time where you have to kind of be quiet, or you're going to trigger that the animals know you're there. So you have to learn how to be silent. You have to be like in your own thoughts and be focused. So I think you probably
absolutely.
did you start finding the parallels in being in nature and hunting that were parallel to meditation?
That's exactly how it came about. It was like that aha moment. It was, man, I'm really doing this stuff anyway. So
Yeah.
why can't I practice it where I feel safe?
Yeah.
And then start to bring it into the aspects of life that I'm not feeling, totally confident or safe. It's building up it's building up that armor in the
Hmm.
safety of the environment of Mother Nature. As I like to think about it, it's kind of like walking into the fields of a loving embrace.
Hmm.
And you get to put all that into practice there. Then when you walk into that unknown area, you've got that armor on, you're feeling confident, your head's up, your shoulders are back, and then you walk into really, the war zone, or where the growth happens, because it's unknown and it's things that are pushing you.
But you found your redemption in being able to actually realize you were doing meditation already. People said, "Oh, you should, maybe you should do that," and you found out you're already doing that. It's one of those big revelation moments. Sometimes everybody goes through like a crucible. Because like I always tell people, like, in order to progress as a musician, you're building off all your mistakes, all the stuff that
Yes,
didn't work, right? And you have to kind of embrace those mistakes and not kill yourself for it, right? You have to kick yourself all the time because that didn't hit. It's the process that brings you to the hit that is what's important, and you shouldn't like denigrate it. You should actually embrace it.
absolutely. But the word redemption that you brought up, that isn't in my book. That wasn't where that came from. That
Oh wow.
came, if to kind of rewind it even a little further, I mentioned that was my second marriage. In my first marriage, we had a daughter, and when that divorce happened, I kind of felt I hit a point where I felt like I was a failure, wasn't good enough to be her father. Ended up
Hmm.
losing touch with her for years, and fortunately, the path that I ended up going on led me an opportunity to find her and reconnect with her. And
Oh, so that.
the fact that a year later I'm building this wonderful relationship with this amazing young lady is where I found redemption.
Oh, so you found it in the reconnection with your daughter. Once you
Yes,
went, but you kind of had to fix yourself, right? You had to get your mindset to a place where you could feel that you were worthy to talk to bring her back in.
most definitely. And see, that's where a lot of the philosophy stuff comes in, because there's a part in meditations where Marcus Aurelius is talking about the mindset shift. It's so unfortunate that all this has happened to me. And then he stops and, no, it's most fortunate that this has happened to me the way that it has happened, because only I can not only deal with it in the way that I deal with it, not suffer for it as much as somebody else may, but it opens up and exposes me to wisdom and knowledge that I would never have been exposed to had I not gone through each step of the path.
Yeah, I think it's like you do have to kind of go through these crucible moments, and maybe don't recreate the crucible all the time, but because some people, once they go through a crucible, they say, "Well, I guess I have to go through that all the time to progress." And so then they're like, "Well, you don't have to create disasters every day to progress, but I mean, you take them as they come, and you learn from what your life experience is. If you didn't make mistakes, you wouldn't be human. I mean, that's part of being human. And I think it's the realization that you can actually recover, that you can, mend that broken bridge, that you can do it. And some you don't have to be so absolute about everything.
Well, I think the part that has to be highlighted there is some of these things that we have to face are scary. You know, when I walked up to the park that day and I met my daughter face to face, and I had to say, "Hey, this was my fault, not yours."
Mm.
I can I compare it to the idea of Davy Crockett standing in the Alamo. You
Yeah.
know, I had this message that I felt was so important, not only to me, but to impact her life. That had she decided to stab me and throw me in the river that day, it would have been okay. I still had to be there and do it. Just
Yeah,
like he
yeah.
stood in the Alamo, knowing that death is coming, and when they found his body, he was underneath a pile of would-be assailants, and finally only gave in when he couldn't pull his knife out of somebody. It's you get in such a flow state about these important things in our lives that that's the kind of drive that you find, and that's what pushes you over the hill when you're facing those outright scary moments.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, in my life, I mean, the scary moment is I actually was at 27. I had cancer. I had a level 3 sarcoma. And I either was going to let it kill me, or I was going to do everything I could to survive. I'm 54. So I survived it. So, I did a bunch of things, and I won't go through it, but it's like I had my crucible in terms of like I had this thing happen. It was an external cancer. It wasn't internal. It was a skin cancer, but it was a level 3. And I had to look at my life and see the things I thought that I was putting like glass ceilings on myself. I was putting myself into lanes. I wasn't being expansive. And a lot of what I did to be where I am today is I started saying, well, hey, I'm not going to put those barriers on myself. So, I was able to travel to Tokyo. I lived in Tokyo for 2 years. I opened myself up to a lot of things. And, and I communicate with different people all the time. And so I think a lot of times it's like you can put all these restrictions on yourself and lock yourself in this kind of cage that you of your own making. And I think a lot of times that once you realize that you hold the key, then you break free.
Yeah, I think it boils down a lot of the time to just like in that scenario, what do you got to lose? You either stay stuck on that side of the door and you just kind of let life pass you by, or you go out there and you live it, day by day. And I think that's one of the most important principles that the Stoics tried to leave us with is make each day count, you know,
Mm.
go out there and seize the best of each day.
So how do you transform, through this like mindfulness, idea in the outdoors, and then bring it to like a podcast? And maybe that's jumping, but the idea of mindfulness, maybe we talk about that, and then your road to actually bringing it to a podcast in your
Well,
messaging. What you wanted to accomplish with that?
it's kind of a funny story because I think my only idea was the fact that I wanted to give back and I wanted to put something out there since that's what saved my life. That's what I'm here because of. And it started out with a blog based off of standing on the boat trying to teach a friend of mine how to fish. It was kind of like I was explaining it in a way that you're under the water trying to look like you're having the biggest anxiety attack in the world. So brings you into it brings you into the moment. You know, you're connecting, and how in reality when we're out in the world and we're having these anxiety attacks, we're trying to hide. So if you tie the two together, it's kind of like teaching you to stand out there and just work your way through the anxiety attack. And from there, I started tying different things that I was going through into blog post, and that was 2020, May,
Mhm.
yeah. And toward the end of the year, I decided that I wanted to branch out and give a shot at podcasting, and I was going to launch the podcast around deer season. It was going to be a bunch of things that I put together while I was out at deer camp. Well, unfortunately, I got really sick, so that whole expedition got cut real short. Fast forward about 3 months, I finally got it going, and I launched it with an episode about mindfulness and meditation. From there, I didn't have much of a plan. I just kind of let things evolve. It was the same loose, free flowing ideas that I was writing the blog about. And about 26 episodes into it, I took a break. No, it was about 24. And that was about the time that I got to reconnect with my daughter. And when I came and started doing new episodes, it was like the momentum never left. So I thought I needed to pump more into it.
Mhm.
And in my journey, it was about time to deal with my social anxiety. So I figured, you know what? I'm going to bring my listeners right along with me, and I'm going to practice interacting with bringing guests on the shows.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I started doing one episode a week with whatever was going on in my world or whatever I was learning. The following week, I would do what I called the campfire sessions. And that would be with, whoever I could rope into coming on the show. And that kind of progressed like that for a good 6 months. And then I upped it to 2 or 3 shows. And now, fast forward to where we're at today, I'm up to running 7 days a week. I
Awesome.
do I do four. No, I do 5 different solo episodes a week where I put together some kind of message based on tying the outdoors and philosophy together to inspire people, and then there's 2 or 3 interviews that come out each week.
So this is primarily on Apple as an audio podcast, and you do it as an audio version.
It is currently at this point still all audio format. It's on Apple. I believe it's on just about every platform that you can find a podcast nowadays.
Yeah, and the cascading that happens now is unbelievable. Because, like I said before, I started in 2016, and now I was initially all audio, and then 2020 I went to video. Um, but I still do audio from time to time with people who don't want to do the video, so I'll
Right.
support it. But yeah, it's a different thing because in audio, it's kind of like when you listen to the radio. And
Yeah.
I do like it because that form doesn't get distracted by visual cues and all this stuff. So it's still kind of cool to do it. Um, but the video has opened up for people who have it's interesting to watch people and the body language that people have and how they talk is a different experience. So I appreciate all the forms, but it's interesting. The podcast world has opened up to so many different types of influencers and mentors and people who are trying to get their message out. And it really is very, very cool to have all these different voices talking about things that are very important. In terms, I believe what you're talking about is critically important because a lot of people don't handle mental health at all. They don't talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. There's a lot of dogma about it. And I think it's really cool when people have the courage to get out there and talk about their experience, and then give people, coping mechanisms on how you can, like, deal with issues.
Yeah, that was the other aspect of the whole launch of the blog and whatnot. I started working with the Surved Nation, which is a hunting education based group. And part of the terms for working together was having a social media, presence and doing things like that. And in the outdoor space, all the videos are geared toward how to this, how to that. I'm out there doing this, and so on and so forth, which is great. All those grip and grin moments, they're important to watch. It gives you
Hmm.
inspiration. It makes new people want to go out. But on the other hand, like you mentioned, nobody deals with the mental health aspect. And
So we kind of
the
function.
outdoor
So
space, yeah,
yeah, I
the
mean,
outdoor
if it is
space
talking about,
is,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it's the outdoor space. We're a community. We're not all happy, chipper every single minute of the day. Just like in
Hmm.
any walk of life or any hobby, any little tribe, there's people that are going through things. And, when nobody talks about it, it's kind of scary to,
Yeah,
to walk into the blind that day and be like, man, I'm just not feeling it today. I life is on my shoulders and it's pushing me down. I don't know what to do. You know, everybody's going to kind of look and be like, man, what? I thought we
yeah.
were just here to kill some ducks.
Yeah, well, they're trying to use it to kind of get away from it, and then they don't want to deal with the fact that it's, I think, like a singer songwriter. You look like a Kurt Cobain, like a Bob Dylan.
Right.
People would understand. Kurt had a lot of pain, and he was able to put it into his work. And Neil Young used to talk about, like the needle and the damage done. Singer songwriters can get to things that are deeper than just a boy girl relationship. They can talk about
Yes.
anything by, like, a Lou Reed. He talked about things that nobody talked about. He talked about the New York dark underbelly and all the details of what's going on in the back corner. And it is a different perspective. That's when the singer songwriter became predominant, when you had guys like Lou Reed and Dylan being able to tell these stories. And they sometimes they're psychological, they're sociological, there's all this stuff going on. And it's not just a simple happy thing, right? It's actually a hard story, like a Tangled Up in Blue.
Yes.
That's a hard story about a divorce, you know, and that's real. Maybe it's not happy and doesn't make you dance, but it's important. you know.
See, that's kind of the thing that drew me to music when I was younger, is that ability to express those emotions that are within. And that was when I had to come up with some angle to get into, the outdoor space with working with Survey Nation. I'm like, man, I'm going to do something different. I got this opportunity. I want to do that one thing that is so important and nobody wants to touch it. I don't care what you look at me like or what happens out of it. And I'm just going to do it. And now when I show up at the blind or I run into somebody that knows that this is out there, there's conversations. And it's always conversations that are beneficial for both sides. And, to touch on the idea of what got me and drew me into writing music, this has been like an extended version of self exploration and therapy to get those things out. And it's really, to me, it's been mind blowing and amazing to see how this community, this camp has come together. And that's where things have drifted into now, is this idea of Project Mindfully Outdoors being like that base camp for healing
Well, I think
and
it's really
progression.
cool. The idea, even the words like Project Mindfully Outdoors. which maybe people never would have thought that you would bring like a psychological and kind of point of view, or where you're actually getting into healing through the outdoors. You're talking about like things that maybe people outdoors don't want to talk about, and then because you were willing to do it, you had the courage to do it. Now people are getting courage to kind of respond to you, and not a negative way, but to actually say, this is helping me, or this is interesting, and I want to talk about it. So because you're willing to have the conversation, then you make it happen. It's like what I always tell like musicians: if you're willing to put your inner thoughts out there and not be scared about it, then you can generate people who have the same feelings. And the reason why singer songwriters kind of hit is because everybody has some kind of emotion. If we can actually accurately portray what we feel, then we actually probably represent what a lot of other people feel. And if we have
Yeah.
the courage to say it, then other people will identify with it. And I think it's the same thing you're doing.
And I think originally on some level, my idea was to kind of be able to bridge that gap between like, the professional aspect of mental health, where everybody's always scared of the idea or turned off by the idea of going and sitting on a couch, staring
Mm-hmm.
at some dusty old degree and feeling like, man, this guy, I don't know what he's talking about. Whatever he's got to say isn't going to apply to my life. So I'm not even going to waste the time. But, you know, the depression and the anxiety and all those different mental health things, we all go through them. It's all a part of us. And it really boils down to that lizard brain aspect and that whole concept. Because if you really stop and think for a minute, these things that hinder us now are what kept our ancestors alive. When you're having a panic attack or you're going through anxiety, would be no different than your ancestors standing in the woods knowing that something was staring them down and they could potentially be dinner. So it's time to back up and get the hell out of there.
Yeah, the
Nowadays,
fight or flight.
right, right. And
Yeah,
nowadays it's like the way the world is and the way that we've tamed the earth, the the same reaction and same response doesn't exactly fit the original intention.
yeah,
So if we're able to walk through the triggers and the things that led you to that moment, that experience, you get an understanding and you're able to delay the response long enough to kind of run down the effects of what's going to happen. So
yeah.
you're,
Because we all, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, 'cause I
so
think
you're
we have
able
this.
to, no, you're able to bust out that, with that more educated, informed response that's going to serve the greater purpose.
Yeah, because if you're having that kind of fight or flight thing, like a wolf attack, but it's like a Wall Street wolf, right? It's
Right.
like yeah, like you're in corporate America and people are doing underhanded things, and it's kind of psychologically violent, but it's not readily apparently violent, right? So people can do things that are very vicious attacks, and you can feel threatened and you can feel pushed down, and then you can't overreact. You can't, just run away. You have to actually face it. You have got to go through that workday and find a way to deal with the depression that's coming from, all these psychological things that are not manifested in as that tiger or the wolf or, the bear attack. It's actually something more, you can't pin it down, but you can feel it. And your body's having the same responses and your mind's having the same response. So how do you handle that? You know, how do you find a coping mechanism?
I wrote this article a few months ago about kind of looking at how a mother deer will leave her fawns just sitting in tall grass, right? While she goes off and does her thing. And she doesn't do that because she don't care or because she has horrible parenting skills. That's a part of nature because that fawn has to learn how to think and respond and interact with the world around it the way that it perceives things. And yeah, a good chunk of them make the wrong response, end up being dinner for whatever predators after them. But a good handful of them survive because they get that space to develop their coping mechanisms, to develop their responses to the world around them. Now, being human, it's the same thing. You know, we learn as we grow up from our environment. You know, we learn from our parents, and we're given the way that we see the world and the way that we respond to it, and it becomes different cycles. Those cycles, they may work for a while for you in your life, and after a while they may become maladaptive, and you have to constantly judge and evaluate those things to decide whether it's helpful or it's not helpful. And if it's helpful, you continue with it. If it's not helpful, then you have to figure out a way to not only break that cycle, but also develop a new cycle. So as you're going through life and it's this constant case of trial and error, you end up serving kind of as your own steward. You know, it's a matter of not only taking care of what you have and also farming for the future by developing yourself, but you also, through the trial and error of events that you live, end up becoming a conservationist too, because there's things that you're tied to that mistakes may have been made that you have to go back and repair. And well, a lot of what ties back to the idea of the outdoors aspect of it is really tapping into that, because I use the North American wildlife model as a good reference point, because it wasn't something that, you know, some guy with a PhD sat down one day in front of a computer and typed up. It was something that was developed over years through trial and error, when we realized that the pattern that we were living was actually having a negative effect.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us end up getting there where we realize that those patterns are having the negative effect, but we struggle to break those cycles. And if we do manage to break them, then we hit a point where we don't know where to turn to develop a new one. And then we inevitably fall right back in. We grab the super glue, we put back together that old habit. And that's where I feel like Project Mindfully Outdoors really is so valuable, because not only is it exposing, you know, a new community of people to a healthy activity, and also touching people that are already involved in the outdoor space, but it's kind of building that bridge and showing you that even when you're stuck in the mud right now and you're just spinning your wheels, there's an avenue to get to that next healthy habit. And that's provided through the 5 episodes that I do myself every day, where it's, you know, we tackle one direct idea and we look at maybe something from the past that worked for somebody, a thought that they left behind about it, or we dive right into Mother Nature herself and we look for some kind of inspiration, like where I started with, you know, the deer and her fawns, just how she leaves them sitting in the grass so that they can
Well, yeah,
develop.
that's where like the lessons. It seems like mindfulness is just being able to be like open to what nature actually tells you. Like you could go into nature and you could put like a man-made concept on it and look at everything in terms of a human type of behavior. But if you actually just let the behavior unfold, it's kind of like a poet where like I'm going to let the muse talk to me and I'm not going to try to correct it. I'm going to kind of just be a receiver. Right? I'm going to have a listening skill or watching skills, and I'm going to watch that deer. I'm going to actually look at what they do and not try to relay some kind of, oh, it's a bad mother because she's not doing what a human mother would do. You just look at it like, well, that's what it is. You let it be. And then if you don't prejudge and you actually start to pay attention, you can look at other things. Is that the kind of mindfulness, like you go into nature and let nature tell you, and then try to learn the lesson from what the world is actually telling you?
Most definitely. And I think instantly of a very common phrase thrown around in fishing. It's called match the hatch. Because when we go out there, sure, we all tie on like our favorite bait, right? We get out there and we're not catching nothing because that bait is not what the fish want that day. As you're out there casting and you're trying to catch something, you're constantly looking around and looking to see what is swimming by, what's alive. You know, what are the predator fish that we're targeting out there? What are they zoning in on right now? And you let the water dictate what you end up taking your original lure off and tying back on. That's
Mm.
where the success happens.
Yeah,
It's
because
all because, yeah,
you're
it's all
reading the
because you're paying
environment.
attention.
Yeah, you're reading the environment instead of coming in with it's like, well, this always worked, or this worked last year, or this worked last week. And instead of looking at the current state of what nature is and really taking that kind of attention, that I think like indigenous peoples, in my opinion, but it's kind of a Cherokee, but that's the kind of thing that they would do. They would actually listen and watch the animals and look at the environment, look at all the plants and like try to understand it, right? And not try to tame it necessarily, but to be kind of one with it so that it could connect and even apologize for taking it. But you're like, I needed to take it, but just having that kind of connection to have that respect. And when you actually respect the environment, then you actually can start to understand it.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, I want to hit you with a question based on that word of respect. What would happen in this world if there was more emphasis on that respect, not only of one another, but the different things that we encounter throughout the course of any day?
Well, I think like respect is empathy, and if you have empathy, it's always going to work better than having some kind of top down, narrow "I'm right, you're wrong." If you get into the "I'm right, you're wrong," and everybody should be in my lane, that always seems to be conflict. Where if you have this other point of view with respect, then it's going to be more harmonious. It's probably going to be less conflict, less fighting, more collaboration, and more connections, more empathy. The empathy doesn't even have to be for a human. It's empathy for the water, empathy for the air, empathy for the wind, understanding like the core parts of the earth and like having a respect for it. So you don't throw that coffee cup out the window, because it's going to end up in a turtle's mouth and kill it because you have some mindfulness of what you're doing, that you consider the actions you take.
And where that empathy develops, it develops within the concept of gratitude. Yeah, it's a buzzword nowadays, but it's such an important practice. And that's another key pillar that's brought me to where I've gotten, from being so beaten down by depression and anxiety that I couldn't function to, and not to mention the social anxiety was so paralyzing that I couldn't do this a few years ago, to the fact that now not only am I sharing what I do without hiding behind any mask or instrument or anything else to block my voice, to the fact that I'm having this conversation with you right now. And who knows how many people are watching or anything else. This stuff would have petrified me years ago. But now it's the fact that I built it on gratitude, and it was something simple. It was the fact that at the end of the day, when I finally started to manage to push myself through a drive-through at the end of the workday to get something to eat, I'd reward myself with a cup of coffee. And I would be so grateful for the fact that I could do that. And then I took that a step further and I took that part to the outdoors. And I said, you know what? I'm so grateful that I get to walk down this trail right now and take this hike that I'm about to take. Or I'm so grateful that I get to go set up my tent and go camping. Then I spun it back and I thought, I'm grateful for the fact that I get up and I get to go to work, get to earn a little bit of money so I can go and enjoy a day with my kids. And I think that as I did that, it really broadened my understanding of living in the moment with true intention, true respect and connection for the land, for the life and the story that I have and the impact that it has, no matter how big or small it is. When I do things like this, be it a visit to a podcast like this or my own, it doesn't matter to me whether or not somebody actually reaches out and says this stuff affected them. I know that at some point it will help somebody because a podcast did the same thing for me. And just being grateful for the opportunity to, I guess, stand on the other side of my own shoes a few years ago is the greatest motivation to. And you've been doing this for years, so you can attest to the fact that this becomes a grind after a while.
Yeah. Well, the thing what I like about the podcast, yeah, I mean, what it became like very vital though too. I think it's like addicting. Like you talked
It
about how
is.
you kind of stopped, you got out of the swing, and then you got back with your daughter, and then you've been on the swing, being on it because it's like it's like music. Like if you're a musician, it's like, oh, I'm gonna write that next song, I'm gonna do that next album, I'm gonna do that next show. It becomes like something that drives you because you got a passion about it. And podcasting is so cool when you start having guests. Is it like I was not very open, and I was a keyboardist. I wasn't
Yeah.
the lead singer. I was never in the front. I was always kind of in the back. And then I decided I needed to have my voice come out, so I started trying to sing and put my vocals on things. Then I got into podcasting, and I'm like, now I'm really up front, and I don't have my board, I don't have my Moog to hide behind, and I have to actually say it. And I said, wow, I was scared of it, but then I'm like, okay, now I don't feel scared about it at all. It's like all that shyness, all that like trepidation. You're like, oh, it's gone.
And look at the confidence that you built out of it. It ends up making you a different person. We all take a different path to develop these skills. And my biggest thing is, I love inviting new people into the outdoor space. I love connecting with veterans of the outdoor space. It doesn't matter who you are. We all have that natural connection within us, that natural call to the land. It's where we came from. And inevitably
Yeah.
one day that's where we'll end up again.
Well,
So
it's funny
while we're
though.
here,
Yeah.
go for it.
Well, I was gonna say that I'm into poets, and Henry Wadsworth Longfellow has a famous poem called "My Cathedral" that's talking about nature as a cathedral, right? That real cathedral is nature, like not anything man built. But it's this poem that's kind of like an ode to nature, and he kind of says, "Well, you know, nature is the cathedral." That's the overall purpose of the poem. He kind of doesn't say it directly. He kind of gets to it. But I think what you're saying with the way you're talking about the project mindfully outdoors, that you're using like nature as your like like a philosophical cathedral
Oh,
to
most
kind of give you,
definitely.
yeah, in the same way Wadsworth, Longfellow, he actually, no, but I think it's somewhat connected in a way to what we're talking about.
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, it's my cathedral. When it boils down to it, it's my dojo. I
Yeah,
go out there and mindfulness really it can be equated to the idea of going to the gym because you go there and you repetition, you're building muscles, right? You're doing the exact same thing. You just don't see it with your eyes. Instead, you feel it with your soul,
Yeah, it's a
and you're
spiritual
build. Yes,
spiritual gym.
yes,
You're going to a spiritual gym. It's like,
exactly it.
yeah.
And
There's more people
just
probably
last
need to
week,
do that.
right?
More people
Just
need to do
last
that.
week, I was having a conversation with Cam Steele over at Fishing and Faith podcast, right? About the exact same thing about spirituality and how it's got such a broad definition. There's no real cookie cutter answer. Of course, for whatever bullet points or historical events, we are where we are with the structures that are more popular today. But
Hmm.
you know what? It's all kind of borrowed, picked through, posted, copied and pasted in different stages,
Yeah. It was
all with the
universal
same
concept. Yeah, it's
right.
universal concepts in all, Buddhism, Christianity, the Muslim religion, all of them have some elements that are the same. And because I'm a Buddhist, we believe in the law of cause and effect. Well, cause and effect,
Yes,
Christians also believe in the same thing. Muslims believe in the same thing. Your actions have consequences. If you do something that's negative, you're probably going to get a negative result. In almost all religions, all spirituality has some level of that. There's some kind of universal truths that go across anything human beings ever believe. There's some of these kind of universal truths or axioms, these things that people kind of fall into because they're out there. They exist. Each of these spiritual practices ended up finding it because it's a universal truth. you know,
and it boils down to the simple concept of the fact that it's food for the soul, right?
yeah.
And that right there is what the camp of healing is all about, is food for the soul. I don't care how you word it, who wrote it, what the purpose was. It's all there for the same reason, because we're all contributing to the same hive and for the same purpose. It's for the
Well, I think it's
development
just
of our soul.
well, I think that's the goal. Well, I mean, as an artist and being a producer too, my goal is to actually try not to create a hit. My goal is to actually affect people. Like people say, well, I would go on some podcast and they say, well, you're a musician. Why are you coming here? There's just a bunch of people. There's a bunch of people here are like thought leaders and mentors. How is a musician have a place in that you know community? And I'm like, well, how many times do people use music to be the soundtrack of their lives, that they take
Yes.
that a musician took and they use it to represent a thought? So we are thought leaders as musicians and writers. We kind of do, we can affect a lot of people. If you see people moving, like, we cause those people to move. I mean, punk rockers and grunge rockers, those people are jumping because of that music. The Beatles got all these people to get into music and become rock stars or become other musicians. We got social action from like Dylan. People actually went and did things in political movements because of what Dylan wrote. So it's the same thing. You can have an effect. It's just a matter of like what direction you want to go. Do you want to be more open to everybody and trying to heal people, or you're more like everything can be positive or negative in the world? Which way do you go, or which degree, how much of that in terms of degrees, which direction are you going, or you're blending things, and everything's kind of like work in progress. But
No, you're definitely correct. You definitely hit the nail on the head there. And I believe internally we all know what that sense of true north is. What the sense of good really is defined for each and every one of us. It may be uniquely individual, but we know how to get there. And a lot of the time, as we talked about growing up and learning life, all these different events affect us in negative ways, we get scared, you know? We even get to a point where we feel lost. But that's where Daniel Boone reminded us that we're never truly lost. Yeah, we get turned around in the woods for a couple of days, but we always find our way back.
Yeah.
And it's that sense right there that really should give you the safety and the comfort to know when you feel stuck, you feel lost, you can walk into these unknown places. You can explore them. And no matter where you're at when you get there, man, the flashlight, it's in your backpack or it's in your pocket. Whether you can see it or not, you flip the switch and then you look at your compass, it'll pull you back north.
Yeah. Everybody's
I'm
gonna
living
find.
proof of that.
Yeah, you're gonna find your true north, and you only lost for whatever time that you actually experience that, but you can always get to that true north and get back back on track. And I think that having the confidence and the courage to face your demons, to hit it head on, find a way to heal yourself with nature. That's, I think, it's a really commendable way that a lot of people could, like, wow, if I come in with nature, maybe I can save a lot of money compared to going on the couch, because well, because then maybe it feels a lot better too. I mean, if you're out there and you're a hunter, or you're fishing, or you're a mountain biker, and when I get out there deep in the woods in Vermont, I just feel like, if after being in Boston or being in New York doing my business stuff, it just feels so much better. Then and I can take those mechanisms, like you said, and learn how to deal with that when I'm in New York, and deal with it, like had a rat race thing, and then learn how to cope from taking that time and communing with nature. I think that having that skill set and learning how to apply it, like you're talking about, I think I encourage people to listen to your podcast, to get those things from what you're saying, because I think you got a lot of great life experience through this way of having a project mindfully outdoors. I think that's a really cool thing, and I'm glad that you came on the show, because I think it's different life perspectives are always important to hear, and I
No,
think that's
I greatly appreciate that. And you're right. But I do got to pump the brakes real quick because even though, it's all about the outdoors, my therapist would kill me if I didn't admit the fact that I still do the talk therapy.
oh,
It's
that's cool.
important. It's very important. And I know I knocked it by talking about the couch and the dusty old degrees on the wall earlier, but
But
yeah, that is
it's still
it,
important
it
for your process, for your progress. You did do it, and you still do it.
right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. There's no reason to look down at it.
Okay.
And whether it's a professional or it's somebody that well, preferably, I guess the best way I could say it with the thoughts that come to my mind, getting that unbiased feedback may
Mm.
not necessarily come from the person that you know, but that unbiased feedback is huge, man. It's amazing what you can get. Not so much the getting things off your shoulders, but getting that neutral perspective. And that's what I really enjoy providing for other people that reach out to me because of what I do with Project Mindfully Outdoors. And that right there in itself has been probably the most rewarding thing. I say, earlier I said how I don't care if I ever hear about it. Once you do something on this scale and on this level with that authentic intention, the floodgates open, man. People reach out to you. There's a lot of people in this world that need these sort of things. And it's been an honor and a privilege to help and serve each one of them. And I can't wait to continue that adventure.
Well, I think that's what's very important about this kind of format, and that people are able to kind of in a unrestrained, kind of open. We're able to go for an hour and really just talk. And I think it is very helpful for people to be able to hear your story and to hear stories like that. And the fact that you pointed out that there's nothing wrong with going to therapy, that it's actually part of your process, and it's actually important. And I think that's good to point that out. But what you're doing with nature is another avenue to kind of heal yourself. And I think that's really, I've probably done it without thinking about it when I do the mountain bike and say, why did I feel so good about it? Because I'm kind of doing what you're talking about. Um, but we are at the end of the time we have, but we're really happy that we had you on the show. I think it's phenomenal. Everybody should check out Michael Martin's podcast and check it out on Apple and anywhere else that you listen to podcasts, because you said it's available like everywhere. The Project Mindfully Outdoors podcast, and we're happy to have you on the show. And then maybe in the future we can have you on again. We just love having different perspectives on our show. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. This has been amazing, brother. I love the fact I get to sit here and tell you all about what I got going on and celebrate this whole new perspective thing. I loved getting your input and sharing mine. So yeah, I definitely look forward to connecting again soon.
Well, thank you, everybody. This will be on multiple platforms tonight. Like everywhere you see it, we're on Anchor FM. So that's going to go out to Spotify. It's going to go out to Apple, and you're on Apple. So we'll push it, and we'll push it on all of our social media. We'll actually put a link on our Instagram, which is Fam Electric Ghost on Instagram. We'll put a link to the link we can put there is actually to the Spotify version, but there are other versions out there that will be on our blogger page on famelectricghost.com. But thank you again for being on the show, and have a great night.